Hello and welcome everyone to the Capital Mind podcast. If you'd like to know more about us, visit capitalmind.in. And if you'd like to invest with us, do visit capitalmindwealth.com.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as the basis for investment decisions. Clients of Capital Mind may maintain positions in the securities discussed in this podcast.
Hi, and welcome to another edition of the Capital Mind podcast. And this time we have with us a very famous personality. We have Kunal Shah. Welcome, Kunal, to the show, firstly.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, thanks. And a quick introduction. Of course, most of you will probably know about Kunal. He is the CEO and founder of CRED. CRED is a startup that initially a very innovative startup. They started off saying you can pay your credit card bills through us, but what it turns out that it is it's actually a proxy for credibility in India. Your good financial behavior, rewarding them, rewarding people with good financial behavior over time, establishing who are the better players in the mix, and then giving them a better place, a better set of deals, a better set of a better life. Really is what credit all about. And of course, Kunal's earlier avatar was with Freecharge, where he started. The idea was the recharge being a big concept. Now, slowly, Freecharge became the synonym for recharge, and eventually got assimilated with Snapdeal as well. So, firstly, welcome again, Kunal, to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
So let's dive right in. I think there's been a bunch of things that I want to discuss with you. But first thing, I was reading a Paul Graham essay. This is a long time back about how to lose time and money. And he says, the rich don't lose money because of spending, but because the high amount of spending or indulgences triggers our natural alarm bells saying, I'm just doing too much of this or I'm doing too much of that. Do you feel this is like true of the Indian rich as well? Do the rich here spend less time focusing on deals or coupons, or should they, compared to, or do they focus on it at all? Because a lot of times I hear we deal with the rich all the time. We hear about them losing money primarily through bad investments. They sold some bad products by bankers and so on. But do you feel, from the relative amount of money that they seem to lose on the investment side versus on the spending side, making money through a little bit of better deals, should people who are affluent perhaps spend less time focusing on deals, or do they focus on it at all? What's your experience with credit?
That's a great question. So I think it's important to zoom out for a second, right? Most of the people who are, let's say, probably making more than 25 lakh rupees a year, and I would want to call them the rich right now for India, are probably making that amount for the first time in their family, right? Majority of them are first time affluent, if that was a word. And first time affluent tends to do the same errors that a lot of family wealth people are less likely to do, right? And it comes from the basic concept of understanding a value of time, a value of investments, and understanding what is the way wealth gets created, right? So far, they have managed to earn more. And the natural tendency for most middle class families, and I grew up in one, was to save. And the word invest is not part of the vocabulary. And it's slowly changing, right? And therefore, what happens is that a lot of emotional behavior is done when it comes to investments because it is done for the first time, right? And you're usually very happy to listen to an expert who seems to be knowing what they're talking about. And we all know that when we rely on experts and not have any basic understanding of what things are, be it astrologer or investment advisor, we are likely to make a mistake, right? And I think this is the biggest thing that I have learned is that, and in terms of understanding of chasing deals or this, I think the fundamental difference is India never had industrial revolution, right? Which means nobody was paid on an hourly basis, right? If you go to West, every single person, their first job is an hourly job, right? They work in a coffee shop, they'll do something else, they'll be a teaching assistant, and they are paid on an hourly basis. And any country that pays an hourly basis naturally trains people to value time, right? In India, every single person started their salary as a monthly salary. And therefore, if I ask anybody that what's your income per hour, nobody has a clue. If I can tell you, all the people who are listening in, less than 1% will know what their income per hour is, which means they do not take good decisions per hour of their time. And therefore, if you find somebody who's making 5,000 rupees an hour as an income, and you can calculate income per hour in many, many ways, but let's say you've done one method and you come out 5,000 rupees, and you find out that you spend 30 minutes to get 1,000 rupees discount on your flight ticket. Was it worth your time? And what if you invested that 30 minutes in reading a book or listening to this podcast that you run? Systematically, a lot of value will accrue to you because you are going to be using your time better, right? And I think fundamentally this concept is not understood. And I think India will take some time and maybe a generation or two before we get there. But in Western society, is very easily embedded because they started with industrial revolution. For maybe close to a century, they have been an hourly paid thing. In fact, they are paid salary on a weekly basis, right? I believe India will value money a lot more if we convert monthly salary to weekly salaries, right? But India is less likely to do that because in our mind we are like, oh, it's administrative headache to pay 4 times a month, and there is a need to make people understand the value of time, and I think that's the reason we tend to value deals. uh, I believe that a lot of time the stock market during COVID also went up because we thought discount will run, right? And we bought a lot more, right? And I think that is a very deep-rooted mindset. It's not that the affluent person will not go to Pani Puri Wala and not take the extra Suka Puri. We love the extra Suka Puri, right? So the value extraction concept, which made us affluent to start with, tends to stay with us. And I believe that the only way you become wealthy from a rich person is when you start thinking about time and not money as the true value.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. In fact, I look at a lot of the small optimizations that we sometimes, I mean, the middle class part of what we do, perhaps. So I'll drive like 2 kilometers to get mangoes at a rate that is 10% cheaper. And I'm like, yeah, if I do the calculation, the petrol costs me more. Forget my time, so it just doesn't make sense from an economic perspective even before my time. Then my time itself is extra. So you're right. I mean, that mindset change has to happen. But then that also means that people will spend time looking at deals, even though the deal by itself may not have changed their life substantially, but because they're rich enough to not care about it at all. But the thrill, perhaps, also of getting that deal
Correct.
has some attraction in itself. That's very interesting. So, I mean, let's talk about the people who make 25 lakh plus as a thought. And I mean, I know that people think of this as, oh, this is CRED collecting data and all that stuff. But I think data has a lot of insights which are very useful when thought about both from a business opportunity mindset, but also from how the economics works when you get to a certain level of affluence, right? So where do the rich in India spend? I mean, the rich being 25 lakh plus. Are they, I mean, obviously food is not, food as in vegetables and fruits, so probably not a big expense. The poor it is, because if you look at the inflation mix that India looks at, 50% of it is fruits and vegetables and meat and fish. But I don't think that's the same in the affluent category. So what's their spending mix?
Yeah.
All the stuff that you see.
I think, Deepak, it's important to clarify about this data question that you talked about, right? And it's funny how we tend to doubt local companies for data, whereas the data is in Gmail, which is actually an ad company. And we tend to not understand the difference between the two. And I think there is a natural problem in India to always kind of have doubts over local entrepreneurs and almost have worship for foreign companies, right? And I think that mindset is preventing a lot of wealth to be created locally. We naturally envy or doubt our fellow entrepreneurs, but are absolutely in worship mode when it comes to large companies. And I think that mindset is preventing a lot of wealth to be created in this country. Uh, but coming to the data question, right? We chose that path with a very simple reason is that we realized that banks regularly sent uh, uh, alerts on every spend you do, but banks never alerted you on any finance charges, any late payment fees, and a lot of that was hidden in the statement, right? And we thought if we can kind of help create an executive summary and let you know that what seems to be happening, we found out that 70% of CRED members did not know that interest charge is 45%. And then we started surfacing this data that you are having this charge, you have having been charged this annual fee, although you are not asked to that being charged, and then automatically it becomes better for them because we are really helping them surface this information, right? And a lot of times, the quest to do this is that we are absolutely proud of what we do with data because we are actually helping individuals, and people who have benefited from that are really thankful. We have like hundreds of emails where people have thanked us for helping them recognize a charge. A lot of people, like one of the customers wrote to us saying that I did not know that my foreign forex charge is 8% when I spend on my card, right? I did not know this, right? And people just like kind of spend on this card not realizing which is the best card to use. So I think uh, that's a very big thing that we are proud of, and I think we are going to continue to do more and more to keep making financial progress happen for our members. And sometimes, we are assuming a position of a doctor, right? Which means sometimes you'll have to give us the blood report for us to tell you what to do, right? But if you're saying that, hey, they are taking blood report from me and not acting like a doctor, I think that's the dissonance that we need to solve for. In coming to spends that we've noticed, Deepak, is that interestingly, before COVID, the spends were massively skewed for affluent on travel and eating out, and both these categories just disappeared, right? And but the thing is, interestingly, groceries for affluent became almost 2x in many places, right? So there is a lot more focus, and you are sitting at home, so people are just buying more stuff, right? Uh, E-commerce has taken off. Subscription behavior, which is anything from Netflix to Tinder to everything, is kind of going more and more, and we are seeing a massive spike on the subscriptions. When it comes to just general stuff in terms of e-commerce purchases happening a lot more. Retail apparel is somewhat down, but fuel. Interestingly, we noticed is that when lockdown started, the fuel spends went up 2x because everybody just filled up their cars in anticipation. But that kind of went down since April, May, June. So March was a massive spike on petrol spends that we observed. Uh, in terms of other spends, like a lot of offline thing has gone down. But very interesting thing has happened when I was talking to some of the credit card heads this month. Sorry, in the month of June, is while 50% of credit card swiping machines are not active, so the machine that swipes credit cards, only 50% of them are active right now because restaurants and hotels, many things are shut down. But in terms of the total spends, we've already gone back to 75%, 80%. So what has happened is that we have replaced cash. And a lot of transactions that were done through cash or debit card or UPI is moving to cards because people are liking the idea of having extra liquidity in these times of crisis where people do not know how to kind of deal with crisis. So they are liking the idea of having more liquidity and spending more and more on their cards, right? So we are noticing many categories which were earlier not used a lot on card are now moving to card, and the total spend on card is kind of moving up to 75-80%, which had dropped to close to 50% when the lockdowns kind of started happening. But now we are seeing 75-80% coming back, and I think as more and more things kind of become easy. For example, Goa recently announced that tourism is open again, and we are going to allow people to do that. And we are noticing people are massively going for vacation. So we launched a new category recently, uh, just a small experiment of doing some vacations on cred, and we allowed people to kind of get the vacations for cheaper using their coins. uh, we managed to sell like a 300-400 packages in a day, in just in Bangalore, for one property. And this one property, one city, we managed to sell so many of them. So there's so much pent up demand in the affluent. And I think as soon as I think from July onward, we're going to see a lot of revenge consumption starting to happen, where affluent are going to spend more and more towards things that they've repressed on their spends, and uh, many interesting things. For example, people are buying extra devices because home office which requires you to have more gadgets and less gadgets than before, right? You need to have a fuller setup. Like you got a camera stand, which was not a need for a home office, but now a lot of people doing Zoom all the time are setting up their home offices to kind of deal with some of these things. They're getting a lamp, they are getting a good comfortable chair for themselves, and so on and so forth. So I think the spends are showing some very interesting patterns. But the summary for me is, uh, credit card spends are likely to recover the fastest, because the affluent may have not seen the income drops like a lot of long tail India may have seen, and it is also likely to create new consumption categories, which we have not seen before.
I agree. I think, even if you look at it from a personal standpoint, amount you spend used to spend on travel and food out, eating out, has now eventually resulted in a saving, and that part of that saving is almost like pent up consumption for a later date. So vacations, like you said, we've been, bottled at home. At some point, everybody wants a vacation, so that's going to explode at some point. There's going to be, this actually, you're right. I mean, the COVID behavior itself has changed, consumption patterns. But I think what you're also saying is some of these more valid or longer term consumptions have kind of impacted, which have been impacted negatively because of COVID, are likely to kind of come back and take an even greater percentage uh, of life. And then, like you said, there's a there's a new there's a new consumption category itself that's been created that would have otherwise probably never existed. In fact, one of the things that I'm looking at is now a home. I have two kids. Both of them have to be schooled remotely online. So now I have three devices. That's mine, and of course four devices, one for each of us. So we've got equipment now to go with each of them, and all that goes on the card. You're right. I mean, in the end, it doesn't make sense to do this with UPI or something. Credit card just is just so much easier. Um, that's interesting. So I think from the credit aspect, of course, you would have seen this evolve. But do you see a lot of your customers doing the moratorium, which they have been offered to credit card players as well?
Yeah, I think we saw a lower percentage in CRED members to do opt for moratorium because we warned our customers that moratorium is bad for them. The reason it is bad for them is that moratorium makes you not get a negative mark in your credit bureau report for not paying on time, but it does not free you up from interest. And if you are going to pay 45% interest for 6 months of moratorium, you are going to get a shock of a lifetime, right? So we warned a lot of our members to not delay their credit card bill payments and pay them in time. Otherwise, they are likely to have a huge amount of challenge, uh, where the interest could be, for example, if you have 1 lakh rupees due and you chose to not pay for, let's say, 6 months odd, your interest could anywhere between 20,000 to 35,000 rupees, which may not be pleasant for you to receive when you have decided to pay, let's say, after 6 months. So we have seen a much lower moratorium, but I think at an industry level, I'm sensing it is probably as high as 20-30%, which means a lot of people have probably either not understood what is the moratorium's impact on their financial status on in terms of prepayment, or they have challenges to be able to repay, which is causing them to not be able to uh, generate enough cash flow to pay off their bills.
Yeah, that's in fact, I think the cash flow part may be still understood because many of these credit card providers they don't like tell you exactly spell it out in the way you guys have said. In fact, we talked about it earlier. I think, and I guess it's been there in a bunch of this thing. So interest costs are tremendous, and you don't get any interest-free period for any of your new purchases as well. So they start accruing interest from day one. So earlier you used to get that 45-day interest period with outstanding. You don't get any interest free period. That just adds up to the kind of interest levels you will pay. So if you run a 1 lakh rupee bill, like you said, 22,000 rupees is just extra, and there is no way your 1 lakh rupee in the bank account would have earned that much interest. So essentially, the banks are getting a free ride. I mean, also, we looked at the SBI cards IPO. SBI is one of the few guys who actually has this disaggregated information on the cards part. They make half their money purely on interest and fees. So only half of it comes from what they get when you actually spend, which is the what they charge the merchant.
Yeah,
So it's a huge.
yeah.
So,
So if you just understand the credit card industry, approximately before COVID, $100 billion was spent on credit card uh, every year, and approximate revenue is in the tune of $5 to $6 billion, which includes interest and merchant MDR as they call it, and like the EBITDA would be as high as 1.5 to $2 billion on that industry, and that is largely because of the interest rate thing. So just to give you a sense, in the US, the credit card interest rate is probably in the 16, 17, 18, 19%. We are in the 45% ish range. Brazil is extreme; they have 175% on their credit card as an interest rate. So in credit card industry, there's a word called as revolve. So what people are revolving on the credit card on the interest rate, and India seems to have $14 billion outstanding on credit card right now.
wow, that's like, that's a huge amount. I mean, 14 billion is what, 100,000 crore rupees. Which is, in
Exactly.
dense. I mean, it's the kind of money that you would, I mean, on a single loan, on a single category of loan. Sounds a
Correct.
little extreme, but yeah, I mean, this is, I mean, business, of course, is for them to generate money, and every incremental person you convert into understanding this, and perhaps people who didn't understand it, who got to understand it, is one customer that will love you for life because you help them
Yeah.
much
And
money.
I think, Deepak, 90% of people who have credit cards in this country are people who have got credit card for the first time in their entire family, right? Like they are the first time users of that product in the family. And therefore, uh, it tends to be the situation where nobody really knows what's going on. And there is a massive taboo on discussing financial matters in India, right? It is considered to be weak if you are taking a loan. It's considered to be weak if you are having to revolve in a credit card. So people just tend to hide it, and in this need of hiding, nobody discusses this matter, and it creates this huge amount of debt that people get into, right? And I think our idea is that can we democratize this? Can we make it simple for you to understand? Can we be the guardian? So CRED has a very simple principle that we are interested in financial progress of our members, and financial progress has two dimensions to it. Can we prevent anything that is causing financial losses to you, which you should not be incurring? And can we figure out a way for you to increase the benefit you can get from the money that is lying around with you? And can you grow more with that? So our goal is very simple. And we are taking multiple dimensions to that to upgrade the life of our lifestyle of our members. And we have noticed that we and I'll give you a small example. We were doing a user test of and calling user calls, and one of our colleagues' friend, she's in the top 10 CA student, like AIR 10 rank student in CA, and that person did not know that once you pay minimum due, you still have to pay interest. So we have confused education of finance to financial literacy. And that is a fundamental challenge. I think it's the compulsory course that you should be teaching in school on how money works. What is the concept of compound interest? Deepak, I recently did a poll on Twitter where I asked people that would you take 6 lakh rupees every month till you die, or will you take 10 crores upfront?
I remember that, yes.
Right? And you remember 70% people chose 6 lakh rupees. Right? Then I was like, maybe this is weird. Maybe I should ask more people. So I got a lot of stand-up comedians to do that on Instagram as well as Twitter, and it was as high as 84% people choosing 6 lakh rupees. And this is English speaking stand up comedians, which means their audience is English speaking, educated people who are probably in decent jobs. This is the state of the country. We cannot teach people how to use credit card or investment till we don't explain them the concept of compound interest. And if we don't understand that, how will we understand investments and how will we understand inflation and everything around that?
Yeah, that's actually, in fact, as on the investment side of things, we face that all the time. So the difference between having $1 million in rupees today, so that's about 7 crores, or let's say even 100,000, so 70 lakhs today, and what it will do for you 20 or 25 years down the line is something that's lost on a lot of people. In the sense, you don't realize that in 20, 25 years, even at 5% inflation, that 70 lakhs is worth what 20 lakhs can do to it, 25 lakhs can do.
Exactly.
That's so being a crorepati 30 years from now is not quite as attractive as being a crorepati today. And that, I think that you're right. I mean, the difference, sometimes I get astonished because even when I was a kid, we used to learn about these, how to calculate interest on your saving deposit. So you had 100 rupees on the 5th of the month, and on the 11th of the month, you put in another 100 rupees. So what's the interest? But they never told us this credit card bill will balloon if you just pay the minimum due. And this should have been obvious even 20 years ago, because that's how the
People
system.
don't know one very specific nuance on credit cards that I did not know as well before I started CRED is that if you decide to not pay the full amount, let's say in the month of May, every spend you do on June is automatically charged the whole interest. So it's not the previous month that will be charged on interest. Every other spend you do after that is going to be charged on interest. So you lose the interest-free period completely if you
And
just pay the full amount.
and it's just a retrospective, right? Because if your bill is generated on May 20th and your
Correct.
due date is June 3rd, you don't pay on June 3rd. Between 20th and June 3rd, any spend that you made, that automatically starts accruing interest from
Correct.
the day that you spent it. So it's almost like, dude, I'm going to charge you interest going back because
Correct.
I'm deducting your interest free period.
Exactly. Exactly.
And it's amazing because just this little thing earns thousands of crores for the credit card industry, where people don't really realize it. And then there's that bunch of fees on top. I mean, it's amazing. And so I think a lot about this. Of course, we could go on because it keeps this thing. But as you said, changing behavior is a must. And I think, let me just switch to another part of this whole thing. So it's like, this is about Kunal Shah, the person, and thought process on where you are. Uh, Now you mentioned, I heard your other podcasts, I mean other interviews as well, where you said, as a kid you even got hungry for a few days for the lack of money. And in the past decade, as a complete change, I guess, is you become one of the richest self-made Indians of this generation. So how do you, as Kunal Shah, how does Kunal Shah manage his money personally? And I know you do a bunch of in angel investing, perhaps. Do you do stocks? Do you how do you think of how you manage your money?
Deepak, I realized that I have a tendency of being obsessed of what I do. So what I decided very early on in my life is that I will not be directly involved in investing money, and I depend on my co-founder at FreeCharts, Sandeep, to manage money for me because I believe he's much more level-headed when it comes to managing money. I'm more a risk-driven person. I like to invest in startups. I have been very fortunate to be invested in many good companies, and to me, I believe that the way the country is going to become more prosperous is not by creating more people who seek jobs, but more people who create jobs. Uh, and I think the only way I can pay back on what I have been fortunate with is to get more founders to realize their dreams and create more jobs. So what I do is I consistently invest in startups, and not for financial returns a lot of times. I believe that uh, I have been very fortunate to learn a lot of lessons. Uh, and I think, Deepak, there's a problem in the word self-made. Nobody is self-made. There are thousands of people who have worked in your journey to make you who you are, right? And I think, to me, the only way I can pay back for their uh, generosity of time, money in many cases, is to kind of pay it forward. Can I create this for more people, and create an ecosystem that is thriving? And like I said, India has a natural tendency to not support local entrepreneurs, which is quite
Yes.
counterintuitive, right? We if you look at Twitter, it's filled with hate about local companies. You will never see people going against a large corporation, because I have observed that envy is a hyper local phenomenon. We envy people like us, right? We never, nobody's envying Elon Musk for wasting money, right? But if an Indian founder is found to be burning money, there are thousands of people who will come and shame that founder or hate their methods. And it's quite fascinating to me, right? That how we are the way we are. A lot of people think that, hey, companies are burning money, but nobody questioned Geo when they give data for free for 2 years to millions of customers, right? And I think it seems to be this unique pattern where we are not understanding what is wealth creation, right? And I always tell people that the only way to be successful is to not envy the wealthy. You should envy the skills of the wealthy people, right? And nobody really pays attention to what are the skills of the wealthy people, right? So what you're asking me, that what do I do with my money, is a great question that you should be asking every wealthy person. That how do you spend your time? How do you take decisions? How do you make choices? Why would you pick this versus that? Right? And I think the moment we study that, we will evolve and we will become well seeking. At this point of time, we are in the zone of constantly becoming, we are all experts, right? And this is a classic thing, right? Like me sitting at home and telling Dhoni is an idiot to send this batsman versus that batsman, right? Like, Uh, uh, why do we be this way? Because we are not interested in learning the skill of being Dhoni, right? Or being a skill of, let's say, being an entrepreneur that is managing to raise money, right? I've never been asked a question on how to raise money, right? But there is always this discussion about, oh, you managed to do this exit. And I'll tell you one funny thing I observed. When I had an exit, a lot of people uh, were upset about it. And I'm like, why are you upset about it? Because they're like, oh, you just managed to sell a company. I'm like, companies are never sold. First of all, they are usually bought. Nobody really sells a company. Nobody plans to sell a company. In fact, if you ever try to build a company to sell it, nobody will ever touch it. Uh, 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 and they are fundamentally built with wrong principles. And I think, and it's funny, right? Recently, Freecharge was acquired by Axis Bank, and it turned profitable, and it's doing well. And the thing is, a lot of times these stories are such long periods, but I think we just have so much. Like, if you see an Indian founder, the amount of angst that he has to deal with from the local fraternity is not about supportive and cheering them up, and supporting them for everything. There is this huge need to go on Twitter and complain about this, and talk negative things about it. And we don't realize that every negative Twitter post makes 500 customers not touch that company again, right? And while we may get 20 likes for it, right? And I think there is this fundamental disconnect that people don't understand about it. And answering your question about what to do and how to spend money on time, I have a very simple view. Everybody should aim that their money makes more money than they can make with their own time. If they get that principle right, they'll be always creating wealth. And the only goal you should have in life, and yes, I went through massive hardship, like including not having food to eat, not having money to pay rent, went through all of that. uh, and I realized that I will not work for money after I'm 35, right? And it's funny enough, but free charge exit happened when I was 35. And I have consistently believed that I am going to be the one who's going to create more wealth for a lot of other people, and then create a, I don't know, a pandemic of wealth in some ways that can create more people to wanting to create wealth for other people. And I think that is what is needed in this country. We need to become all wealth creating, because wealth is not zero sum. And that's another thing most Indians don't understand, that they think Deepak has to become poor for Kunal to become rich. There is no such thing, right? And I think that concept, if it's not understood at school level, we are going to be remaining this society that is going to be confused about money.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, I think I agree at multiple levels with you because I've been an entrepreneur before it was fashionable to be one. I was in '96 when I started my first, '97 started my first company. I remember I used to get these things of, "Acha, you didn't get a job in an IT company." So I'd be like, "No, I actually run an IT company." So they would be like, "Oh, okay, whatever, you know." So there would always be this feeling of you're fighting the odds all the time. You're all and but over time, I've realized that India is like that. So people hate
No, but
people.
I think we should change that, Deepak. I think if we start accepting the India the way it is, and I think you and I are not participating, having a voice in this country and not participating in changing this mindset, then we will never create wealth in this society, right? We are always going to be this Indian crab society that we are always known to be talking about, which is not good, right? We all need to be creating a wealth mindset, right? And not envy and hate the wealthy, right? There is this popular theme to hate the wealthy. How will we all become healthy if we just keep hating wealthy? How will that happen?
In fact, I mean, look, we're both in Bangalore, and I think in Bangalore itself, the whole concept of this person drives a Fiat from the 1985 time frames. Oh, look, he's so rich, but he still does that. So I keep looking at that and saying, yeah, this somehow is not okay.
So
You don't need
it's fascinating.
ostentatious
So
display,
Deepak,
right?
it's funny. It's very funny. My advice given to me by a lot of affluent people after my exit was, Kunal, don't buy a fancy car, because a lot of people will not be able to see it, and they will make sure that they will always have hatred towards you. And I was like, if we appreciated wealth, then we will desire it. What if all the entrepreneurs drove supercars? Then shouldn't it inspire other people that I want to be like this guy, right? And I think this mindset, and if you notice, every billionaire on Twitter always does this emoji, right? Always show humility, because we just cannot accept them to be very good at their game, right? And I think the concept is that we are not trying to abstract their skills, right? We are not trying to learn how did Tata Group become Tata Group, how did Reliance become Reliance, where are the notes on skills required, where are the notes for billionaires, where are the notes for why is Vijay Shekhar doing what he is doing, what are the skill sets. We don't know that. We don't even know that part of it, right? And I think, but there is, everybody has an opinion about, oh, this guy is this, or this guy is all about funding, and this guy is about that. Why? And I think there is this deep challenge on this mindset to be changed, and I think you and I should equally participate in changing that. One, we should do a good job of making people realize what is money and how it works and the principles of money. And second thing is that making people understand that wealth is not zero sum. And third thing, focusing on learning the skill sets of wealthy people versus constantly envying their possessions.
Yeah, this is like, we could have three separate podcasts on each of these. It's like it's such a deep topic. Zero sum, for instance. I mean, we talk about the stock market. They say it's zero sum. I say, no, yaar, I buy a stock at 100 rupees, I sell it to you at 200. I'm happy. You buy it at 200, you sell it to 400, you're happy. The guy who's bought it at 400 waits for it to become 600. Who's lost money?
Correct.
Nobody's lost money.
Correct.
So it's not zero sum. It's just the assimilation of things. And to me, it's more important to create the environment that creates that assimilation than to actually tell people which stock to buy.
Correct.
So, like you said, for every rupee that a person does not lose in the credit card fees, there will be a person who uses that money for something more productive.
Absolutely.
Right? So I think, yeah, well, let's, I guess, this is very interesting. I would love to have you on another podcast. We talk deeply about the philosophical aspect of these things, but also from a practical standpoint. And I was on Twitter today telling people that Twitter is like a dementor at some point. So you go there, there are people who are trying to suck the very life out of you, the very happiness out of you, right? So you're fighting that and living. But I think that's a challenge in itself. You have to be thick-skinned to be an entrepreneur in real life.
I don't think I think all the entrepreneurs who are, I would say, somewhat successful are because of their thick skin, right? I have been ridiculed for raising money. I've been ridiculed for creating money for my investors. I've been ridiculed for creating wealth for my team. I've been ridiculed for everything. There is no such thing that you will not be ridiculed for when you are an entrepreneur. But I'm saying that when you see that kind of behavior, other people will be discouraged from becoming an entrepreneurs. I'm not going to be discouraged because of Twitter to not do what I'm doing in life. I'll probably make 5 companies before I die. The question is, will other people be disheartened from this? And I think one very interesting thing, one very senior banking person had told me that, Kunal, this country is a country which loves to create gods and do their Visarjan. We love to make somebody big and then put them in water, right? And this is a problematic thing, right? If we are going to demonize people who are wealthy, if you're going to demonize people who seemingly has more wealth than us, then we will kind of always have this feeling that it's unfair. And the only way you create wealth is through unfair behavior, which is not true. Deepak, you've been running a business forever. You have provided value, and therefore you are there. What you are doing, and it's not about constantly thinking that, hey, he must have schemed with people and done this with people, and therefore he is making money. Nobody creates wealth like that, and I think that mindset needs to change.
I mean, look, in the end, nobody is, so at some point there will be somebody who's unhappy with something you do. You realize that whether you run a business or you do a job, you're never going to get, always have a happy manager or happy customer, or like 100%. There'll always be somebody who, but at some point, I think you're right. I mean, the problem really is in this feeling that drives away other people from it. And perhaps that's one of the, they call it the filter, right? So if you've been, there was a guy who told me this, Deepak, if you know, this company has been around for 60 years. Just the fact that a company has survived for more than 25 years in India, you give a little, let's say 2 or 3 extra credit points just for survival.
That's true.
Just that. So true. So yeah, I mean, let me go on to the other part of maybe the consumer part of very interesting. You pointed this out a number of times. In the US, you have credit checks and scores. So people do a credit check when you apply for a job, when you want to rent an apartment, and a bunch of things. It's not just for financial purposes. In apartments in India, when I came to Bangalore, the person asked me if I eat non-veg or not. That was his credit check. Okay, so in a way, not that.
Or we replace credit check with 10-month deposit.
Yeah, 10-month deposit, exactly. Yeah, we in fact that is slowly. Yeah, I was in Gurgaon before this, where there was a 2-month or 3-month deposit, and people were fine with that. So it's Bangalore and Bombay that perhaps have this thing.
Funny, right? Just imagine the amount of money stuck in rental deposits in this country. And do you think landlords go and invest that money? I know they are just lying around in the bank account.
I know for a fact that because in the family we have people who rent out their apartments, they don't do anything. It's a fixed deposit.
Correct. Fixed deposit is even a more premium behavior. I would say most people are just keeping the money lying around their account, and they say, "Kabhi bhi nikalna padega to liquidity rakhna zaruri hai. So what if the tenant doesn't work out? The point is that credit score is a way to shape a society. Think about it in a slightly different way. In the US, you are less likely to get a job if your credit score is low, which means you are less likely to do misbehavior with money and be more responsible with it. In the US, car insurance can go more or less expensive based on credit score, because they have observed that people who have poor credit score also have naturally rash behavior when it comes to driving their car, right? And there are so many impacts of these things that if you look at every society that has managed to become very uh, prosperous, they have designed these systems which prevent this. Because see, Deepak, in this country, I'll tell you one interesting data point: the number of jails have not increased from the time British left.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The population has gone multiple times, which means have we become more nicer? Answer is probably not. But it's impossible for punishing bad behavior. There is no way we can punish bad behavior. There is no scale that we can punish bad behavior. The pending cases in legal system is probably worth 40 years now, right? So only way we can do is prevention of bad behavior by incentivizing good behavior, right? And if you look at it, that is the whole thing. Can we incentivize good behavior? Recently, I had read that income tax is going to make it a separate queue for people who are paying taxes regularly, right? Now, that's a very powerful thing in my view, because why not be having pride about it, right? You and I paying a large amount of tax every year. Why are we not treated in a more positive way, right? Why is somebody whose credit score higher not treated in a more positive way? And if we do that, more people will want to do that behavior, right? Uh, uh, unless there is difference in treatment for people who have good, trustworthy behavior, we are going to have a challenge. I'll give you a small example. Let's say Mintra is saying that our return policy is only 7 days. You can return stuff in 7 days. But what if for people who are with high trust score are allowed 30 days to return stuff, 60 days to return stuff, and people who have generally shown bad behavior to be doing returns, no returns policy for them, right? And the problem is we did one standard platform. Okay, 7 days bus. The good guys and bad guys are treated equally. I'll give you a small example. A friend of mine, she was in India and she observed this weird thing that we have a separate compartment for women. And we never think about this, right? It's nowhere in the world that we have this challenge that females have a separate compartment. So I answered to her that the reason we have separate compartments so that they can be protected. And she said that why can't the men protect them in their own compartment? And the question is that we just have a blanket solution, which is separate banking, a separate compartment for women, right? And it is quite fascinating, right? That we are still, like India is one of the few countries which has separate queue for women. And sometimes we don't understand these things, that, and with a curtain, that too, right? And it's probably a practice done only in a lot of backward countries now, right? Where we have not understood, and this is airport. This is not even something else right now. So I think we have not understood that you cannot apply a single principle. You have to have nuanced treatment. I'll give you a small example. RBI has second factor authentication on all credit card payments, right? But what if I want to opt out of it? What if I, as a user of this facility, want to opt out of it? I don't want to put OTP every time. I just want to do one-click payment. It's not possible today because India has the tendency to create one solution, right? Uh, and this comes from the mindset of not being nuanced, right? I remember somebody very senior told me yesterday that I think the only thing we did during lockdown is enforce lockdown. So whereas
That's
instead
very
of
true.
preparing for it or doing something about it in terms of facilities to other thing. And I think this is the thing, right? We tend to have a lot of pride in enforcing rules and creating bans and all of that, which I think are non-nuanced solutions, right? Any investor will be afraid of investing in a country that does not handle things with nuance and creates this blanket rules, which seem to be a sign of a society that needs to evolve a lot more.
Yeah, as much as I think we've seen in the last few months or even earlier than that, we create those barriers at different levels. Earlier, I mean, much earlier, before perhaps a few hundred years ago, it used to be a castes level of barriers, stuff you couldn't go around. Now there are maybe other layers of barriers which are not necessarily logical, like you said. Like, I mean, for instance, why should government officials not pay? Those tolls at the toll booths. I'm like, yeah, they pay you a salary. You just pay the thing and get it reimbursed if you have from your department. But why would you create a separate thing that said, oh, I'm a government official, therefore I don't have to pay any
No,
toll?
the issue is even bigger than it's a separate queue for
Right.
them.
Oh, yeah,
That's
there is
more
actually. In
problematic.
these cases, there's one reserved only for them, the
Yes.
VIP lane.
Yes.
But on the other hand, I mean, I think having that as a criteria, which is not assertable by certain needs versus doing a pure economic credibility, like you said, merit pays in a sense. If you had good financial behavior, I'll reward you, which means it's available to everybody, regardless of birth.
Exactly. And suddenly you create society to do well, right? All the good actors will win, all the bad actors will not win, and therefore more good actors will want to be, more people will want to be good actors. I'll give you a small example. In the US, uh, insurance can be as expensive as 10 times more if you have a bad driving behavior, right? And because of that, somebody who's a good driver, their insurance cost keeps going down. In India, Deepak, you are a good driver, I'm a bad driver. We are both paying the same car insurance cost. And this is the problem of non-nuanced solution. Credit score as a system, if it's used across the board. So, for example, at CRED, the criteria for joining CRED is that you need to have a credit score of at least 750, 800 and above in many positions. And why do we do that? It's very simple that if we are enforcing that for other people and our members, we should at least hold ourselves to the same bar, right? And I think that creates this culture saying that people are getting aware about it. In US, everybody knows their credit score by heart and they
Correct.
check it regularly. In India, most customers do not know the credit score till credit actually says, hey, here's your score, now you enter all of that. And I think that is a big thing. If it doesn't matter to you because it's not impacting your life, but if it did impact your life, you will fundamentally have a huge opportunity ahead of you.
That's interesting. Now, I think the necessity is obvious, and I think you as CRED has also done one part, which is, for instance, get my credit score, which is
Correct.
a lot more complicated in other places. But what other ways do you see CRED playing a role in reducing this friction of society in a way?
Yeah, so I think we are very interested that can we create more and more benefits for people for having higher credit score. One of the things that we are really considering is that can members rent apartments to each other? Because everybody's high credit score, we don't need to kind of really go for external trust mechanisms to kind of do that, right? What if today, if you wanted to, let's say, sell a car or buy a car, second-hand car, what sources do you go to? How do you go to the trustworthy sources, right? We are also thinking about working with many organizations which gives us a special privilege to people with high credit scores and make it faster access for them or give them extra benefits for being trustworthy. So we are really working hard to ensure that there is a differentiated treatment for people with high credit scores. And my strong belief is that it will take a long time. And CRED is not going to be the only company that will manage to do that. There are multiple participants have to be there. Uh, I, if you notice one thing about, let's say, American visa, right? If you have an American visa, many countries allow you to come to their country,
Yes.
and that removes the need for getting so many visas. Same way, we believe that if we do a good job of creating that as a standard and allow more people to participate in their things, and really allow these customers to get a benefit from that, we'll be able to make a huge difference, and more people will improve their scores, and more people will care about being timely about their commitments, and so on and so forth.
Yes, okay. So it's not just the deals that you can get from the credit card points, but also the fact that you're now in a group of people that are, then therefore you could use that mechanism to say, okay, I'll lend within, I can get you a rental, I can.
Correct.
It's a very, very, very brilliant. I think, I mean, the problem really is because every time you do something for a very large set of people, the people that are going to abuse that system come and override it, and people end up making rules against it, I suppose. I think that uh,
Correct.
the idea that you don't need those rules simply because you're only letting people enter that have
Yeah, prevention is better than cure.
in that such actually, and in fact that gives you more data, because if anybody misbehaves within your system, it's much easier to identify, because
Correct.
it's an interesting point. So now let's switch to, I guess, times like now. So we've got a system where perhaps who was credit worthy 4 months ago is no longer that credit worthy. And
Yes.
we, as a society, perhaps are not yet aware of how this has changed, sometimes within ourselves. Uh, Sometimes there is an intent to pay back if I have a loan, but there may not be the resources to do so. In some cases, the intent did not really exist in the first place, so now it's become obvious because of the lockdown. Uh, Apart, I mean, this perhaps plays a role now because cred becomes more important than anything else, to be able to figure out if a person is still what he was or what she was a few months back. So this financial behavior, or uh, the concept of things changing, how has it affected, let's say, the people that you've seen or the customers that you have through the lockdown? Is it have you seen something surprising or interesting in
Yeah.
this?
So, Deepak, what we've noticed is that people who care about their scores are naturally prone to be very conscious about keeping their repayment behavior intact. Even if they're having financial turbulence, they ensure that their uh, history is kind of spotless, right, in some ways. And I think this is a very important thing, right? If you fundamentally keep a powerful mechanism through which we create a strong uh, behavior to say, hey, uh, I am going to be conscious about not dropping this, right? And I will figure out a way. So, if you have noticed that people do not get lowered score if they do not pay the full bill, but sometimes not paying it completely results in lower score, right? So paying partially also results in scores being intact. In moratorium, obviously that fear is not there, but in general, people who are conscious about their scores tend to keep it really, really solid and ensure that they are not deviating from that. So what I have noticed is that there is a need where customers need to think about uh, 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 modifying their own behavior to ensure that their signaling value does not get deteriorated, right? And in these times, there are people who have lost jobs, there are people who have potentially had a situation of medical situation in their family which increased their spends, and so on and so forth. I think what we have noticed is that people who tend to have a higher score do not let these events get impact on their score, and figure out through either their savings or investments to kind of sail through this period, because there is a general financial responsibility that we have seen among these customers, right? So but we do not know how deep is the impact of this uh, COVID situation going to be. We do not know. We are going to have more and more and more situations of second order, third order impacts coming because of this. And I don't think we truly anticipate this. Like, there was a belief that cars will not sell, and I believe cars will sell now because nobody wants to go in cabs and share a cab. We do not know how some of these behaviors are going to shape. And it means that we are going to have unique scenarios emerging in each sector which we have never anticipated before. uh, and will and I always tell this joke to people that the largest employer of this country is inefficiency and not relevance. Uh, and in a world where everybody was forced to be more efficient, all of us are more efficient than before because of technology being generously used in our life now. Uh, many jobs will not come back. Many jobs will not come back. And I think that is a scenario that is going to cause a huge amount of ripple effects on this. And we have to be constantly focused on these aspects.
No, well, I think I mean I've written a bunch of these things on. For instance, this STD PCO operator. Uh, where did that job go? There were hundreds and thousands of them in every
Hundreds
city.
and thousands of them. You're so right about that.
So you know, apart from that, but the point is, it did create
Or
jobs.
Xerox machines.
Or Xerox machines. Xerox machines have so soon. I mean, your phone is your watch, your torch, your FM player, and there was a thing called a pager at some point.
Yes, yes.
And so I guess the like, and also somebody told me this was my first startup. Deepak, I'm proud that you're creating jobs. I said, but that's not the objective. He said, what do you mean? He said, if you're telling me as an entrepreneur, my job is not to create jobs. My job is to run a successful business. If I can do
Right.
that, more jobs, that's great. With less jobs, that's great. It's part.
Yes, yes.
But you will not necessarily see me saying that I have hired 100 people, therefore I'm proud. I'm
Yes.
proud because I run a successful business, not because
Correct. Correct.
and I think if we create 100 entrepreneurs like me, you'll have jobs naturally because everybody needs.
As long as we have less job seekers and more job creators, it doesn't matter how many jobs they create.
Yes, and eventually it'll it's quite remarkable. I believe hopefully this lockdown will also teach us to become better entrepreneurs and bring more entrepreneurs in because there are opportunities. In the destruction of a little, there is the creation of a lot.
Yes,
So
absolutely,
the
absolutely.
it'll be quite. I mean, I think you'll probably see this much before I do. I look at these wealthy rich companies at the stock markets who are giants who don't change, and you on the other hand see the small entrepreneurs much more. And I wish we could have you or Vijay Shekhar Sharma or one of some of the big companies in India that first they started from small and grew big. I hope they list on the stock exchange so we can proudly own a big piece of these as well. But uh, I think the change will be starting to be visible from at your end more than at the stock market end, honestly. So let me also take you through another. The next question I have is around this is probably complex because I've heard both sides of the story, and some of your successful peers in the Indian startup ecosystem uh, have now taken a stand after they have become successful that they want zero or a very limited involvement of VCs and external investors when building a company. Now, this may be because they've gotten successful and have enough money. So people may have the option of funding their own companies by themselves, or you may have had the option of doing this yourself versus talking to external investors. But how perhaps has your experience been in that aspect, and what maybe you've done this twice, you've done this with Freecharge, you've done this with CRED, and what's perhaps the lesson that you've learned from the Freecharge and that you might have decided to do differently with CRED?
I think what you expect from your investors changes as you get uh, doing second or third company, right? The level of advice I'm seeking is very different now, right? Earlier, I would seek advice of who should I hire, kind of an advice, or how should I structure my team, and how do I do branding, kind of an advice. But now the advice is more around, hey, how do I think about regulatory framework 12 months out? How do I think about creating this into a large profit making entity in 5 years from now? How do I think about that, and so on and so forth, right? So my view is that uh, I think uh, there's a pattern on second time, third time founders, which tends to be the lessons that they are looking for is very, very different, and advice is very, very different. But having said that, we are at a very early stage on our entrepreneurial ecosystem. We do not really understand this. It is still sexy, shiny stuff from the outside, right? Nobody knows the dark stuff of running Capital Mind or running CRED is, right? And it looks fancy because we all have lots of Twitter followers, so people assume it is such nice life that we live, but it is not understood truly. So I think what, in terms of more control, I think it is problematic to think that you need to have more control. I think you need to have more competence on your side. Sometimes the competence comes in form of board members. Sometimes the competence comes in form of team members. Sometimes competence comes in form of co-founders, right? And I think everybody should be looking at accumulating competence and not be too worrying about controlling. I think controlling mindset naturally repels competence.
Got it. So you're saying the VC fear of losing control is probably less important
Yeah,
than the fear of,
everybody is too busy making a big thing happen, right? And I think everybody's realized that it's best to have the founder run the show as much as possible, unless there is something fundamentally wrong about it. So we're all learning and getting there.
yeah, I guess, I mean, one of the problems that I mean, I hear both ends of that story, and then you hear stories of founders being kicked out of their startups. So I feel that it's a business problem.
I think a lot of times in India, I've noticed is that one or two stories become uh,
Folklore.
a norm of news, and I think that is unfortunate. We have to look at uh, things and not through anecdotes but data, and I think that culture is a little bit amiss in our startup ecosystem.
Right. It's also the way it's been. Like, for instance, in the public markets, it was known that for 20 years or 25, 30 years, in fact, businesses which didn't work out very well would typically go back to a bank and say, yeah, I didn't work out. You guys take a haircut and let's start again. So you gave 100 crores of a loan, you took a 40 crore haircut. The business now owes only 60 crores. It can go back and do things. It does something. It takes a 200 crore loan. It doesn't work out. So the promoter siphons in the middle. This is normal. Once in a while. Now come a new regulatory framework called the bankruptcy code. Suddenly you can't go to bank and says, "Ha, theek hai, I'll take the write down, but tu nahi chalayega company. You will not run the company anymore. I will get somebody else to run." Suddenly everybody's crying foul, saying, no, this is not the way it's supposed to have worked. So the new has replaced the old.
So that's pretty amazing, right? Like, then we'll have less bad behavior,
Correct.
and systematically more wealth will get distributed through this method. So I think it's a good thing.
It's brilliant. In fact, I think it's the way to say that, listen, you don't want to lose your company, just don't do all this bad behavior. If it's truly something that can't be fixed, you would have lost your company anyways.
Correct.
That's not like it's the end of the story, but don't expect that everybody. So it comes. I think it's very interesting that from the VC behavior also, we tend to overrate or underrate a few stories, whereas in India the ecosystem is very raw right now. You don't
Yeah.
have depth that you could say exists in the West, but at the same time. It just takes a few people to be really successful to change that equation. Right? So
Absolutely. Absolutely.
more power to you, more on that. So I think I'll end with one part, which is I think fundamentally you've been an entrepreneur, you've met investors, you've spoken to investors both abroad and in India, entrepreneurs both abroad and in India. What is unique about a founder in India or being a founder in India in terms of the experience, in terms of the opportunity, perhaps?
I have noticed that Indian founders who have done profitable businesses before, and when they enter tech businesses, they are a lot more creative than people who have not made profitable companies before. And the reason is that in India, the profitability only comes from creativity. Uh, 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 like I said, in India, it's very hard for people to pay for convenience. So you have to find interesting ways to kind of charge. Like for example, the reason we have not big SaaS companies in India because nobody will pay for a software to make their life more efficient, right? And therefore, time as a concept is another. M&A environment is not big in this country because we are like we don't value time of buy versus build kind of a thing. We are mostly thinking that इसमें क्या है मैं खुद बना लूंगा kind of a thing, right? And the mindset because of that has created this thing of uh, more creativity in general. And I think I've noticed that we are not designed to scale things a lot, right? Scaling as a mindset is not well understood. uh, Western countries and founders tend to have a scaling mindset a lot more than Indian in general. In terms of other observations I've had is that uh, nobody in India thinks about very large games. Like most people are like stuck, very happy with if I'll make 100 crores, right? Nobody's thinking that what will it take to create 10,000 crores, right? And I think ambition is smaller in this country. And I'll tell you why this happens. I remembered I was in China once and I saw the Great Wall of China. And if you go there, it is mind blowing when you see that it is so tall, right, and so broad, and made for 22,000 kilometers, right? It blows your mind. And you see a lot of Chinese kids go there during young age, and they see the enormous structure, and they know it's man-made, right? So they know a scale is possible through human ambition, right? But if you ask anybody in India, what is the biggest man-made structure of India that you're proud of, they'll say Bandra Ceiling Road, right? And that is the scale difference that they think about, and it fundamentally changes ambition, right? The average Chinese has 100x more ambition than Indian because we have not seen something of scale emerge, physically emerge in many ways. Another India's challenge, and I think the difference is the gender ratio, right? In the US, you will see a fair amount of female participation in the founder ecosystem or in the leadership positions. In India, less than 20% of women work now. That is lower than Bangladesh, lower than Pakistan now. In fact, urban female participation of labor has dropped to 8%. Uh, and that is lower than many countries around India, including some of the most conservative nations. We are lower than that. And these facts are not understood by Indians that unless uh, women work, jobs will not be created. And I tell the people say jobs kahan hai, and they don't understand the concept that let's say an affluent family has both the genders working because their skill sets. Let's say आपने भी MBA किया है, आपकी वाइफ ने भी MBA किया है, दोनों जॉब कर रहे हैं. You are creating 10 to 15 jobs because of a dual income, right? Because you'll have two nannies and you will have this thing and then you will use this product and all of that, right? And a lot of urban women are currently home with the skill set of the same degree sometimes as the husband. And that is a huge problem that we are not going to grow this country's per capita income because just to put things in perspective, the urban female participation of labor in India is 8%. Urban female participation of labor in China is 90%.
Wow.
Which means if you go on a street on a regular day, you see equal genders on the street going to work. But we don't understand this. When I've so many times I've asked VCs that what do you think is female participation? How many women work? And they say 50%. And I'm saying कभी रेलवे में गए हो कंपार्टमेंट एक होता है फीमेल का और 12 कंपार्टमेंट मेन के होते हैं. If you go to a plane, an airport, there is one queue for women and 10 queues for men, right? Haven't you noticed that, right? And this is not understood by most Indians. And I think unless we realize that, I don't think we'll become a very wealthy nation.
Well, perhaps we'll be forced to because if everybody is working from home, why can't women work just as?
Exactly my point. So the thing is, work from home can create an unusual opportunity for women to be extremely successful and be financially independent and not have these similar restrictions that they had in the past. But it is first cultural change. I think we have a society that needs to have an open mind about this. and fundamentally create an ecosystem where there is more conducive nature for a lot of people to participate in the labor system.
I'm with you on that. I think for two reasons. I mean, that one layer, of course, you've got, you know, I think to a large extent in the investing world, I face this question all the time. We actually meet, couples together, talk about financial planning and so on. So to a very large extent, I've found that my job as a financial person, a person who looks at stock markets and all that stuff, is that discipline and rigor, and simply not going crazy every once in a while makes you a lot of money in the long run. It's just the way the market is. You
Yes.
just have to keep your head down and do.
Yes.
More women are capable of this, and call me sexist about it, but that's how my experience has been. More women are good at this than men are. Yet the world of investing is dominated by men.
Yeah.
In India, definitely.
It's funny you are saying that 92 to 93% of credit cards are owned by men. 95% of all personal loans are taken by men. 90% of car loans are taken by men. 90% of home loans are taken by men. The question is that it's not just about investing, they're just missing from almost all dimensions of financial behavior. And that needs to change.
Oh, well, I think, this is opportunity. This is a great time. I hope everything on that front changes. There's more to participation, like you said, just for fundamentally. And I think I see where you are in terms of scale, ambitions, the ability to think of 100,000 crore number. We talk about it, I mean, because we, to a large extent, deal with some numbers like this. 100,000 crores is not a lot of money by world standards, but it literally changes the game for everybody who's in India. And they look at you and say, isn't a 1,000 crore outcome just as good? No, well, it's got to be. But then the attitude of the number of people who think 100,000 crores is probably countable on my hand and perhaps your hand and mine put together. But that layer perhaps has to still evolve. It's very fascinating being. I of course did not take opportunity as well as I did. I should have perhaps 20 years ago when I was an entrepreneur, and perhaps not even 10 years ago. We were in different fields, but then watching this whole ecosystem evolve, I think what you're saying is going to come true in the next few years. The thing
Absolutely.
we're seeing is that we're negative about the richer entrepreneurs or the successful entrepreneurs. All that is going to change. We just have to stick with our guns and
Absolutely.
just succeed. But thanks a ton, Kunal. It's been a
Thank you.
wonderful time talking with you, and I hope I see you as among the top. You will. I don't have to see you. I'll know that you're one of the top, most successful
Fingers
Indians.
crossed.
Everybody.
Fingers
I think the word CRED and the company CRED has a great future because CRED is how big economies evolve, and we are, by all definitions, a big economy. And to all the listeners and viewers here, I hope you do try CRED. I'm a member, so I'm biased. Okay, so also because I've known Kunal, I've been one of the early investors. I'm a little stingy. I don't spend so much on the credit card as much as perhaps I should. But looking at the lockdown and the demand of my kids growing up, I think I'm going to go there much more. But all of you should try it. It's a wonderful experience. Thanks so much, Kunal, again.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
And also thanks everyone for watching. We're at Capital Mind _in on Twitter. I'm Deepak Shenoy on Twitter. Kunal is Kunal Shah. Isn't that your handle? Shah
It's
Kunal.
Kunal B11, yes.
Kunal B11. That's the one. Because now Twitter shows the full name. I don't remember the handles anymore. But yeah, ping us on Twitter. I hope and be positive. Twitter isn't all dementor. Most of you are obviously going to be positive, but let's hope to see Kunal on more pedestals and shows as things go along. And all the best. Wash your hands. Be safe during the lockdown. Thanks so much. We're Capital Mind. This is the Capital Mind podcast. Do tell us what your views are. Thanks so much.
Thank you.